Rav Huna said a halacha that you're not allowed to use wicks and oil that don't burn properly for the menorah, just like you're not allowed to use those wicks and oil for the Shabbos candles. And Rav Huna added that halacha for the menorah applies whether it's Shabbos or whether it's weekday. So comes along Rava, and he says, what's the reason for Rav Huna? So he says, well, for the weekday, the reason is because you're required to relight it. And you may be negligent and you won't relight it. So therefore we say that you have to use appropriate wicks that won't even go out in the first place because we're afraid you may be negligent and not relight it. And for Shabbos, the reason is because you're allowed to use the lights of the menorah. It's called Mutter L'Shtamish Laora. And therefore we're afraid that while you're using the light of the menorah for your own personal use, you may come to adjust the candles, and that would be a violation of Shabbos. Tosfos is going to ask, it's this Tosfos right up there, Mutter. Tosfos is going to ask that how does Rava know that there are two reasons here? One for the weekday and one for Shabbos. Maybe the reason for the weekday is good enough for Shabbos. Let's see it inside. That's the reasoning that Rava gave for Rav Huna's halacha that you're not allowed to use those lights on Shabbos because you're allowed to use the lights of the menorah for your own personal use. Vim Taimar, let's just see, I wrote out Vim Taimar. If you will say, you'll ask this question. Minole Rava, how does Rava know the Sava Rav Huna that Rav Huna holds? The mutter l'shtamish laora, that you're allowed to use the light of the candles for your own personal use. Dilma, maybe hada amar ein madlikin. This that he says ein madlikin b'Shabbos, that you're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to use those wicks and oil on Shabbos, not because you're allowed to use the lights of the menorah for your personal use. Really, you're not allowed to use the lights of the menorah for your personal use. It's also to use the lights of the menorah, exactly like we learned later from Rav. But so why on Shabbos are you not allowed to use those wicks? If you're not allowed to use those lights anyway, then there's no concern that you might adjust it. But it's because of the reason for the weekday, Mishum Desavar, because he holds Kafsa Zakakla, that you're required to relight it if it goes out. And just like on the weekday there was a concern that you may be negligent, on Shabbos there's even a bigger concern. Let's go to the next page. The obvious concern of ve'ein yachal lahadlik b'Shabbos, that not that you may be negligent, but you're not allowed. Ein yachal, you're not able to relight it on Shabbos. If you're not able to relight it on Shabbos, then of course you have to use the good wicks, because if it goes out, then for sure you won't be able to relight it. So Tosfos answer is a very simple answer, and it's just based on the wording of Rav Huna. We're explaining how Rava knows what Rav Huna holds. So v'yesh laimar means you can say the imkain. I spread it out over there. Because if so, that there was really only one reason. He did not need to say, tzarech means need. Bein b'chol, bein b'Shabbos. I put that in quotes. Whether on the weekday, whether on Shabbos. Kivan d'chad taimo, because if it's the same reason, he didn't need to say whether this, whether that. Ela havalei l'meimar. I'll just write that out. Havalei means he should have said. L'meimar means to say. Meimar means to say. We had it twice already. Ein madlikin stam, just plain. Stam means plain. Just say, don't light. You can't light with it. And omida ka'amar, but since he said bein b'chol, bein b'Shabbos, whether it's on the weekday, whether it's on Shabbos, shma mina, that abbreviation you know already, shma mina, she'oid yesh tamacha b'Shabbos leilahadlik, that there's another reason on Shabbos why that you're not allowed to use those oils and wicks. Levad mitamchol, besides for the weekday reason, v'hainu shemayata, and that reason is because you may adjust it. Vim kain savar, if it's because a problem of adjusting, then obviously he holds mutter l'shtamish laora, that you're allowed to use the light of the menorah, and therefore we're concerned that you may adjust the light. I just want to point out that Tosfos concludes that we don't paskin like Rav Huna. Tosfos says over here, "V'chein hilchasa diner Chanuka asur l'shtamish laora." You're not allowed to use the light, and he says Rav holds that, Rabbi Yochanan holds that, Abaye accepted that opinion. He says what we find later on. But I just want to say that the Ramban gives another answer, a very interesting answer. Tosfos' whole question was based on that if it goes out, you're required to relight it. And obviously on Shabbos you would also be required to relight it from the Hilchas Chanukah, but the laws of Shabbos would prevent you from relighting it. The Ramban says that that's not true. On Shabbos, because you're not allowed to relight it, then the laws of Chanukah would have been different, that you don't have to relight it. So therefore, there must be a different reason why on Shabbos you're not allowed to use those wicks and oil, and that must be because you're allowed to use the lights, and you may come to adjust it. So again, we have two reasons here. One is because the wording of Rav Huna, and the Ramban's reason is because we need another reason, because on Shabbos the halacha would have been different.